Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royalist. It's Monday evening, another very dramatic day of royal news and events, ranging from the absurd and the farcical to the perhaps rather more serious. Hoping that we're going to be joined by of course, Tim Tiemann, who I can see backstage, eagerly waiting to come on. And also hoping that we're going to be joined by Andrew Lownie, the author of the book entitled, which I think there's a very fair case to say kicked this whole thing off. So I think we might start with if we could bring Tim onto the stage, please, Ben.
Hi, Tom. I love that tie. It's really nice. That's really. You're looking very snazzy today. You're looking very. Snazzy.
Yeah. Well, I like to keep up the standards.
Very good. It's just a very good outfit going on there.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hello. Happy Monday,
look, we're just waiting for Andrew Lownie to join us now. Hopefully he'll be with us. You never know, technical gremlins and all of that, but hopefully he will be here. Now, he said he might be a few minutes late because he's a busy man running around endless different media obligations and requirements. But I think until we wait for Andrew to come, just something that I think we could talk about first, because it might be more interesting to talk to Andrew about the sort of details of that, and Andrew, the houses, the Royal Lodge, this thing of wanting two houses and all of that. So I wonder if maybe, Tim, we could start by looking at the clip that was filmed by Republic, and they've actually given us permission to use the clip of Charles being heckled today at Lichfield Cathedral. And maybe we can make that clip full screen, Ben, as big as possible.
Tom, before you play the clip, can you explain to the readers and watchers who don't know what Republic is and why it's so important in Britain?
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, so Republic is an organisation. It's run by a very competent chap called Graham Smith, who their mission is the abolition of the monarchy. They campaign for the abolition of the monarchy and the installation of an elected head of state.
Okay.
They've gone from being a kind of fairly minor feature of the landscape to having a bigger cultural footprint, really. They're a funny organization because in a way they're sort of wedded to the cultural footprint of the royal family, because the more people are talking about the royals, the more people are also talking about abolition or getting irritated by the royals or wanting to get rid of them. And they have in recent years developed a bit of a taste for doing these very low budget, very effective viral stunts. And today Charles was doing an engagement in Lichfield, which is I guess it's about two hours from London, something like that, a little bit north of London. And afterwards, he actually did quite a very important event honouring LGBT soldiers and service people who were persecuted in the British military for being LGBT. And there's now a monument has been opened to them, and basically it's a sort of oh, great. I've got some exciting news. I've received a notification that Andrew Lownie is in the studio backstage. And I can see you, Andrew. If you give us a little wave to show you can hear me. Yeah, Andrew can hear us. Great. So, Andrew, you're not on camera now, so don't worry. We're just going to start, Andrew, by just showing this clip. I was just explaining that Republic filmed today of Charles being heckled outside Lichfield Cathedral. So, Ben, if you're ready, do you want to roll the tape?
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew's Charles? What do you think? Should the MPs be allowed to debate the royals in the House of Commons?
And so, Tom, just to be really clear for the listeners and watchers to this, was that an actual Republic activist themselves in the crowd, and it was all filmed and set up in that sort of sense?
Exactly. So as far as I can tell, well, this was, let me be completely accurate because I don't want to defame anybody. This was posted to Republic's account. So I think it's reasonably safe to assume that the Republic knew it was coming. I don't know the identity of the person who called that out. What I thought about it was, I thought was really interesting, was I thought, A, it was interesting it's taken this long to happen. And B, the other thing that I thought was really interesting about it is that it is on the front pages of every single newspaper website today. It's going to be on the front pages of all the newspapers tomorrow. And I think my argument of why it is on the front pages is because it's reflecting what everybody's thinking, right? Everybody is thinking, who knew what when? And we know that, as we were talking about yesterday, even Charles is now using briefing in the Sunday Times that the Queen knew more at the time and should have done more about it. But look, we have the expert here, Tim.
I think one of the interesting things about that clip is that the person, whoever it is, if it's a Republic activist or campaigner themselves or whatever, is actually asking the questions direct in whatever the setup is. They're asking the questions direct, but no media organization or actually people being paid to make people accountable as part of their jobs, i.e. journalists and the media, have not had either the opportunity or the kind of direct wherewithal to do. So I don't find it at all surprising that it's on the cover of news websites, because whatever condemnation or opprobrium will be heaped upon that person by some organizations, he's actually asking the questions which not only people, but actually people paid to find out the answers to those questions should and could be asking of people in power, if those people in power made themselves accountable in the way that taxpayers pay their money to make them, might expect them to be accountable. So it's kind of interesting. You're right, Tom. He's a kind of that voice in the crowd, as inelegant, and as you can see some of the reaction of other crowd members to him asking those questions of Charles. He's acting in some way as a tribune, a sort of a single person acting as a collective tribune to the otherwise silent voices of many, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we've got the expert here. So let's bring in Andrew, please, Ben. There he is. Andrew Lownie, the man who got the ball rolling of this whole incredible story with his amazing biography entitled Andrew, we're thrilled to have you here. We both have so many questions to ask you. We've promised not to talk over each other and just ask you one question at a time. We're going to pepper you with questions. We're going to try and keep you for as long as you can. I know you've got thousands of media opportunities all over the world, and we're really just so grateful to you for coming on here. Could we start with this video today? Do you think it is reflective of public anger about the way that Charles, the royal family, does seem to have covered up for Charles? And did they cover up for Charles? Did they cover up for Andrew?
Yes, they did cover up for Andrew, and I think that's part of their problem now about how to deal with it. I mean, I do think the public opinion is way ahead of everyone. The media is picking up on that. They can see the story. I slightly disagree with Tim, and I think the media have been posing these questions. It's quite difficult sometimes, and parliamentarians clearly haven't been able to pose these questions because they're not allowed to have any scrutiny or criticism of the royal family. But, I think there's been a lot of editorials, particularly in places like The Independent, raising wider questions about royal accountability and inherited privilege. I was talking to Will Lloyd, who's on the New Statesman this evening, and their cover this week is to call for the end of the monarchy. It's quite a serious move, and I don't think we're in that position yet. But this is a moment of crisis, and I keep saying I think it's the most serious crisis for the royal family since 1936, because people have got to this point where they just no longer trust elites. And they just feel that there's a lot of very cozy relationships going on. I welcome the fact that the Parliament is going to be looking at royal finances and the Crown Estates, but I think there are lots of other things they should also be looking at. And I'm sure Norman Baker's new book also will add to the debate. He's been a fierce critic of royal finances, particularly for a long time.
Tom, did you want me to say something?
I'll just carry on.
Yeah, Andrew, just carry on monologuing. No, Andrew, I'll ask you, one of the other stories that obviously broke today in terms of inching the ball forward a bit was in the London Times, the Times of London. And again, it's kind of, it now seems to be the royals are trying to do a sort of house a go-go situation on the Windsor estate between Andrew allegedly wanting to move into one of the, is it Frogmore he apparently wants to move into, Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife, moving into another one, their marriage being in a state that they now don't want to be living in the same place together. And the public, I don't know how the public might be responding over there, I'm based in New York, about this notion that, okay, if he gives up Royal Lodge but ends up getting 2 homes out of it in some sort of sense, is there any either truth to that? Or do you think, again, the public will just not buy this as any solution or accountability recompense to the ongoing saga unfolding, I suppose?
Well, I think I think the royals don't want the 2 of them on the royal estate. It's a constant reminder that their links to the royal family, they want them, like the Duke of Windsor, to go abroad. I think that will be eventually what happens. So it's still this softly. I can't believe, Andrew turned down Frogmore when it was offered to him before. I also think it's extraordinary that they're demanding 2 different houses. I mean, Adelaide was able to encompass the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children. It's got plenty of bedrooms. And the idea that Sarah Ferguson is calling out for a separate home when she's not even married to Prince Andrew. I mean, she's been squatting basically at Royal Lodge for the last 25 years. And why, a Crown Estate property should be made available to her, I think is going to cause a great deal of irritation. I think the problem is that he has an ironclad lease, and he will only go either voluntarily or if he's given a better offer. This is the negotiation going on. I find it strange that he wants to remain there. I mean, next to his nemesis, Prince William. It doesn't really make sense to me. But these 2 are pretty shameless, and they kind of just, I suppose, they just want to be in Windsor. But there are plenty of other options for the royal family. I mean, for the royal family, for Andrew. I mean, they have other properties around the country. There's no reason why Sarah, who's just sold a house for 3.85 million in London, that she shouldn't, go renting or buy something herself. I can't quite see why we should be, paying for her still when she's had a very good divorce settlement. Her children have got basically grace and favour houses, flats at St James's Palace and at Kensington Palace, as well as homes in Portugal and the Cotswolds, multi-million-pound homes with lots of bedrooms. Perhaps they could take in Granny. So it seems extraordinary, and it's back to this very sort of shameless behaviour, both in that we saw at the Duchess of Kent's funeral, we saw with the statement, just over a week ago, and they just clearly can't read the room. But I do feel sorry for the royal family because it's difficult to know what they can offer. And of course, there are all these rumours that Fergie is going to dish the dirt, and if she's sufficiently pushed out of the royal family and she doesn't feel she has anything to lose, and indeed her daughters also are pushed out in effect, then who knows, what Simon Schuster are going to pay for her memoirs. So I think it's all pretty dangerous territory for the royals now.
Tom and I were discussing. Oh, go on, you go for
it. We sometimes call this royal property game Royal Monopoly. Do we not, Andrew? And for good reason, as I think we've got a. Look at that! Look at that! Now,
graphics are
brilliant there. So you can see there what is going on. And I mean, it is a picture of extraordinary privilege, isn't it? I mean, the idea that, I don't want to be here because I'm too close to that person. I mean, there was a hilarious piece in the Times, actually, just published just now by the brilliant Polly Vernon, a great writer, sort of saying that, ordinary mortals, of course, neighbours are always a problem, but only the royals can, demand what neighbours they do have or don't have. But I mean, just go back to our Royal Monopoly slide again. Andrew Lownie, I mean, it does seem incredible, doesn't it, that Andrew, obviously he was given that place originally when he was the spare, basically, and he had this very defined royal role, and there's always been a problem of what to do with the spare, and this seemed like part of the solution. But this is clearly not appropriate for somebody who is no longer in any way involved, not just not involved with the royal family, but an absolute disgrace to the royal family. I mean, that property is just not appropriate, is it?
No, absolutely not. No, and the optics look terrible, and he doesn't, realize all that care. But I think, the earlier point of your question, the problem is the royal family did know about this. I mean, they tried to shut the story down. They actually prevented ABC television from running a story. And I talked to people at the News of the World who had the story in 2009 and were prevented from writing it. Time and time again, as I say in the book, people complained to the palace about Andrew's activities, whether it was sexual or financial, and they were ignored. And we've got to remember that Andrew is not a Superman. I mean, he was able to operate in the way he did because he was enabled and protected by his own staff, by courtiers, by diplomats, politicians, civil servants. There are a lot of people who saw what was going on and said nothing and did nothing. There was, as I say, some honorable exceptions who did complain and they were ignored. Some people, raised these things and then found that their careers were curtailed, whether it was in the Navy or in the Foreign Office. So, pressure. There was some pretty heavy-handed tactics going on at Buckingham Palace to protect him, and. I think in some ways we need to have a wider investigation in how the whole thing works. Otherwise, it's going to happen all over again. And I wonder if William really is as transparent and so keen on change as he claims. Everything I've heard suggests that he's actually more secretive than his father is.
Yeah, well, I mean, totally. We know less. We certainly know less about his tax affairs. We certainly know less about his private life. We certainly know less about a whole range of things with William. But I think what William does understand is that, he does understand that most people do not see the distinction between being a working royal or a non-working royal or a member of the family or this or that. He's just like, Andrew can't be around us. And I do think that he gets that and understands that. But there was one other thing that I thought you were just talking about there, Andrew, saying, that, and I've been saying this for a while, that they're going to ultimately need to pay him off to get rid of him. So I did a bit of the maths earlier, and this is what I wrote. Andrew's demands also reflect the fact that he is currently enjoying one of the most advantageous property deals in Britain and is now so hated and despised by the public that he really has nothing left to lose. It would make no financial sense whatsoever for Andrew to move out now, as under the terms of his lease, he would only receive about £557,000, it's about $650,000 in compensation. He effectively prepaid £8.5 million for 75 years occupation, which works out to roughly £113,000 a year. A tiny sum for a 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park on 90 acres, whose market rent would easily exceed £1 million per year. Staying put, therefore, offers him extraordinary value. Over the next 50 years, he and his heirs could enjoy accommodation worth around £50 million on the open market for no further outlay. By contrast, taking a £557,000 payout now would mean walking away from it would be a move that would be, from a purely financial standpoint, completely catastrophic. So, I mean, Andrew actually has some pretty good cards to play in this game of, I mean, maybe it's royal poker more than royal monopoly, but I mean, he's not going to go for nothing, is he? Because he doesn't care.
Absolutely not.
He doesn't care what people think of him.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's come down to a transaction. What will you pay me to go if I'm going to go? We've got to remember, what is Royal Lodge going to be used for once he's gone? I mean, given the security concerns, given the cost of running it and indeed of refurbishing it, I think it's going to be quite hard to find people to move in. And so is the taxpayer going to have to do this? perhaps in preparation for it, let's say, being set up as a conference centre like Cumberland Lodge. So, everyone was very keen to get him out, but did they think through actually what would happen once he was out? And he's got to be housed somewhere. And yeah, it's a good question. I mean, does he deserve a grace and favour because of all his royal service up to now? Or should he be cast out on his ear, a bit like Sarah Ferguson, and just have to find his own way? I mean, he's
Andrew,
got that
one of the most interesting trajectories of the last few days has been the sort of oscillating attitude of the British government, which at the beginning of this latest chapter was very much listening to the news broadcast was, we're going to leave the royal family to get its own house in order. We would never presume to tell them what to do. And then when MPs began to break cover, first in the opposition benches and then Keir Starmer himself, the pendulum seemed to swing sort of another way entirely. And at the current reading, we have a possibility of parliamentary debate, investigations by official government committees into finances, etc. Where does this kind of end? Is Parliament now going to be, and British MPs and that arm of the British power structure, going to be taking a more active role here? Is the royal family going to get its house in order? And do you think the relationship between Parliament and the royal family is being recast in real time as a result of this saga in terms of power balances and various things like that?
Yes, no, certainly things are changing. I mean, I was on Newsnight last week, and one of the people there was a Labour MP, and she was saying, and in fact, I think Nick Watt was also saying that MPs had basically been given a 3-line whip not to stir up trouble, and actually the constituents were so angry that they began to change their minds. And I think it is interesting that Jenrick is saying some of the things he's saying. I do think there needs to be parliamentary inquiry into the wider issues of royal privilege and accountability. I'm not sure focusing it just on the Crown Estate and Royal Lodge is actually the best form of investigation. I mean, I've tried for years to get the Constitutional Affairs Committee or the Public Accounts Committee to look at this, and they've just ignored me. So it's slightly sort of interesting to see a lot of these people like Baroness Hodge and others jumping up and down, and Meg Henry after lobbying them for years and them doing absolutely nothing. But anyway, it's good that we're moving forward. I think that the royal family realise, or some of them do, certainly William, that they have to adapt. They're probably having to adapt more than they would have done if they played this a bit better earlier on, either by dealing with Andrew years ago or at least putting out a slightly better statement on that Friday before last. But I suspect it will all be slightly sort of controlled. I mean, we with government, as I think, unless events have moved on, have said that they won't give government time for it. So it's up to the Liberals to find that one of their days. I suspect they may find that they don't find time in the schedule. There are more important things. But there is a bit of passing the buck. The royal family is saying, well, it's up to Parliament, and Parliament's saying it's up to the royal family. And they need to, that's not a difficult thing to do. I mean, there is this network between the Cabinet Secretary and the Monarch's private secretary to actually, liaise on these issues. And so they could quite easily, if they wanted, put through parliamentary time or use letters patent or whatever device they're going to use to make some of the changes that the public seem to want. But it's moved on from just get him out of Royal Lodge and get rid of his titles to actually let's look at some of the others. What's Prince Edward paying in Bagshot? What are Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie paying where they are? Why are they, as non-working royals, being given these grace and favour properties? So I think we're going to see many, many more questions posed, and I think we will see those posed in the media, and I hope now possibly from parliamentarians as well. And we're certainly getting them posed on social media, and that's what's sort of driving this. I don't know, how close you've been following it, but I mean, my experience of just watching Twitter is it just exploded. And there's very little that's positive that's been saying. It's only about Charles Moore, who seems to be supporting Andrew at the moment. And that doesn't surprise me.
Tom?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's been extraordinary, and as you say, very interesting to see the pendulum, as you say, starting to swing to Edward and Sophie. What are they paying? And I think that's going to be very interesting, and I think it's going to be very hard for the palace to say that they are not going to say what they're paying, having disclosed Andrew's lease. I do think it is going to be difficult. And of course, Andrew, you've spoken a lot about Beatrice and Eugenie and believing that they have considerable entanglement in their parents' affairs. And, it is weird that they have this apartment at St. James's Palace, basically. Like, why do they have an apartment at St. James's Palace? And how much are they paying? These are now very, very valid and very important questions. And I think that they're going to have to answer them. And I think that, having thought last week that the Palace would do anything to avoid this getting onto the floor of the House of Commons, I now actually don't see a way that Parliament can't debate this. It's of such pressing urgency in the country. It's all people are talking about. Some guy goes and heckles Charles decides to get on a train to Lichfield and just shout to Charles a very reasonable question, which is, what did you know? When did you know it? And why haven't the police ever got involved in this? Which are incredibly reasonable questions, which, you, me, Tim, amongst others, have asked. It feels to me like the will of the British people now is just that all these things are investigated. And I think this argument that it's a waste of parliamentary time isn't really going to cut the mustard anymore, because I think for most people think that it's a very good use of parliamentary time, actually.
Exactly. I think people feel very strongly about it. And I think the other thing is, will we see investigations into Andrew and Sarah? Will there be pressure put on them to act as material witness and talk to the victims' lawyers and others? And I do think that that's the next stage. People will be. I do think this is a very strong case for misconduct in public office for Andrew, and pressure will be put on the authorities to actually start investigating him properly, not the sort of pretend stuff that they did before. And I think there's a good chance charges will be brought, and then we are in uncharted territory. So I think they're kind of feeling their way at the moment. But they need to get ahead of the story, and I think they will probably throw him under the bus. What I've found is, one, many more people are talking to me who wouldn't talk to me before, or indeed just coming out of the woodwork. And these are people like protection officers, quite senior people who quite normally wouldn't have spoken. And talking to friends of mine who are journalists, they're getting tip-offs from the Cabinet Office and elsewhere. So I think possibly, Tim, there is cooperation going on between Palace and Parliament, and they're using the media in other ways to get the story out. And it's quite a useful diversion to have Andrew kind of taking the flak, as long as that takes the pressure off, let's say, the wider questions about accountability. And the danger is that once they've got the scalp of Andrew, they'll come after other scalps, and the thing has got its own momentum.
Yeah, Tom and I were discussing precisely that actually last week. I.e., weirdly, the two opposing parties here, whether it be Parliament and the royal family, actually using the situation differently to get what they needed out of it, and realizing how Andrew could be parlayed in that way. Andrew, one of the other things that we were discussing last week, at moments of high royal crisis, whether it be the first days of Diana's death, where the Queen and royal family misread the public mood very dramatically, then leading to a similar sense of precarity around the institution. Are we at that level still with Andrew? Does Andrew have, in the first few days of this, there seemed to be a sort of combustibility around the institution. Is there a sense that at moments of crisis like this, despite all the very supposedly talented people acting as royal spinners or spin doctors or advisors, the men in grey, whoever they are, why does the palace get it so wrong at moments like this, given all their experience of PR crises and PR disasters? And why, and if they do get it so wrong, have they not, in the years intervening from Diana's death to various other moments of royal crisis, have they got people sort of in there going, we keep getting it wrong? I mean, to think we could give Andrew 2 properties instead of 1, that's a solution. No, the public clearly hate that idea. Why?
Well, they may not approve of that.
Why do they get it so wrong at moments of
crisis? Possibly because the royals don't listen to them, possibly because the people they employ are sort of sycophants. The people like Christopher Geit and Patrick Jeffson, who speak truth to power, don't seem to last. we don't know. I mean, we know the story is leaked, and that's where the negotiations are. I mean, they may be trailing this, thinking, well, are people going to accept that? I don't know. I mean, I think, ironically, I ended my book by saying Andrew, though he was a supporter of the monarchy, may actually be the person who brings it down. And actually, I think we've gone one stage beyond that. That actually, because of his bad behavior and the fact it's now been called out, he actually may be the saving of the monarchy, because he may actually then lead to some sort of reform, which will allow it to survive. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm just amazed, as you say, that the narrative isn't being driven, but much more by the palace. It seems to be that it's well, I think Tom has covered this very expertly. It's chaos clearly in Buckingham Palace. They don't know what they're doing, and they're kind of just making stabs in the dark. I mean, the difference, I think, in 1997 was that Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell clearly seized the situation and kind of moved in there. And we haven't got decisive leadership like that at the moment in Parliament. And so that's why the ship is slightly rudderless at the moment. But there should be opportunities for someone to move in there and direct things. So it's now kind of been just buffeted by the media and by public opinion. And clearly social media has moved on a long way since 1977. I don't think it existed then. So, and that's clearly quite influential. The mainstream media is no longer as powerful as it was. And there's now this very pluralistic sort of media, which is kind of pushing the agenda.
Yeah, in real time. Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a question, if I may. Andrew, what did you make of this really, really weird story in the Sunday Times yesterday that Charles was blaming Elizabeth for the Andrew mess, and that it was all Elizabeth's fault, and she had left an unexploded bomb under his monarchy? By a very respected royal journalist, Roy Nicker. We were talking about it yesterday, and Tim made this interesting observation that this is something that people have been saying on social media. They've been saying in the comments of our thing. And of course, Queen Elizabeth was indulgent of Andrew. But to blame the mess on Queen Elizabeth when Charles was co-monarch, we were all told, for certainly the last 5 years of the Queen's life, if not the last 10, really, from the point, as you say, that he managed to get Christopher Geidt fired. I thought it felt like another, like Tim was sort of saying, how did they get it so wrong? Like, we all know what we saw with Queen Elizabeth. We saw a dutiful woman, give her all to the country and largely maintain discipline amongst her, clearly it's now revealed pretty awful children. Squabbling children, to be more precise, not awful children, but the sort of squabbling children.
Succession.
And And do you think that do you think that the Queen was responsible? And B, do you think it's a good strategy policy decision for Charles to explore? Do you think it's going to be a fruitful avenue of spin and PR to say that it's all Queen Elizabeth's fault? Because to me, it just seems like a crazy strategy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think your piece about that was very good, and picking it apart. I mean, it is odd because, I mean, certainly when my book came out in August, and I suggested the Queen had been pretty indulgent towards her son and indeed had helped him. I was sort of crucified by people. This was Saint Teresa, and we weren't allowed to say that. But it is, we do know that Charles can be a bit whiny and likes to shift the blame sometimes. And this is maybe their strategy. I mean, they're just trying something rather than sort of fessing up that actually they did turn a blind eye, and now they realize the seriousness of the situation. But yeah, it's easy to put the blame on a dead woman. But also, some of the staff were the same staff there, and the comms team and people. So, it wasn't the Queen entirely making decisions. So it does seem strange. But I just feel that the King isn't in control of this. I mean, they like to pretend he is, and they're just sort of reacting to events rather than trying to get ahead of them.
To your earlier point, Andrew, I was talking yesterday with Tom about this notion that social media is driving this so much in real time, and the kind of furious spinning of that wheel of social media is happening in real time. And perhaps the palace, in some sense, are putting up these, for want of a better word, trial balloons of sort of like things that are being buzzed about on social media and saying, oh, actually, that one might work for us. Like if we say that there was a significant enabling effect of the late Queen Elizabeth, why not try that one and see if that one sort of flies? Something else that we were discussing last week very much, and which I think has gotten lost in the sort of palace intrigue aspect of this, is Virginia Giuffre herself and her words, and the publication of her words first as extracts in British newspapers from her book, which was published, and then the book itself being published a few days later, and the power of those words and how visceral those words and her story read on the page. And I wonder, regardless of the kind of feverishness of the 24-hour news agenda, how powerful, effective, and in some sense, as a motivation for the events that have unfolded since affecting Andrew, have the words and the presence of Virginia Giuffre and her legacy been as an engine of all of this, Andrew?
Oh, I think absolutely crucial, and much more than people realized. I think, her book is much more powerful than I think people realized.
Absolutely.
We kind of thought we knew the story. In fact, it's gone straight to #1. So clearly a lot of people have bought it, are interested and have read it. But I agree. I mean, it really brings it home in a very personal way, lots of new information. And it really, it brings home the sleaziness of the whole thing. In some ways, we kind of debated these things slightly in abstract terms. And then when you actually see it and some of the detail, the discussions about the age of his daughters and stuff, it really brings it home. And that's why I think there is a strong appetite that he should be held accountable. I mean, as well as others, once those names begin to emerge. But I do think that, no one is going to be satisfied until some sort of justice is delivered. So, I don't think, I think the points you're making, I don't think they can sort of fudge it any longer. They've really got to do something. And I think also Sarah Ferguson, there may be some grounds there, investigating her charities, for example, where there's a case for fraud. And that would solve a lot. I think that would sort of kind of draw a line under the whole thing, make people feel actually the establishment doesn't always protect elites, that they can face justice if they break the rules. But at the moment, there seems to be this two-tier system. If you're rich and powerful, you get off. And that would send out a very strong signal to people that actually no one is beyond the law. So, I mean, almost I can see them, I wouldn't say being made an example of, but actually it being seen to be quite useful to bring a case.
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would agree with you, Andrew, that I think the publication of the book, the publication of Virginia Giuffre's memoir, definitely lit a fire underneath the whole thing. I think when it started to be serialized, that was when we got this first announcement that he was going to give up the title and all this kind of stuff. Although I did think that, fantastic. Look at that, Andrew. Somebody giving you a pledge. I'll make sure that the money is passed on to you. Thank you very much to that person. Every penny helps when you're in publishing, I can tell you. And another one coming in, Andrew, you'll be glad to hear. Yes, and we thank you as well for your tireless research and dedication. It's absolutely something enough. And I've said this before. I mean, literally, the British establishment literally tried to ruin Andrew because of his book on Mountbatten. I mean, they blocked everything that they did. They tied him up in court battles. They tried to bleed him dry. And absolutely, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Congratulations to Andrew on this book. And it's a brilliant triumph for journalism. It's a brilliant triumph for Epstein's victims. It's a brilliant triumph for the people, for Andrew's victims. And I know our colleague Tom Bower, who's another great journalist who's covered this a lot, always says, it was very, very easy to write a biography about these people. Just find the victims. Just find the victims. And I very much felt that's what you did, Andrew, in this book. You gave a voice to the victims of Andrew and Ferguson, the people who were just, endlessly insulted. And, I was just listening to that Paul Page interview. Yeah, the protection officer, saying that Andrew would just scream down, you lardy ass this and that, and yell at them and abuse them and tell them, to break the rules and to sign his mates in without putting in the book and to sign Glenn in without putting it in the book and all this. And they just, it's very clear reading your book fundamentally that Andrew just basically considered that, he was Prince Andrew and he could do what the hell he liked and no one would stop him. And for years and years and years, he did exactly what he liked. Nobody stopped him. It was completely corrupt. They took money from anybody and everybody. And, guess what? The chickens have come home to roost. And in fact, somebody messaged me in the private chat and said that their brother and lots of people have met, and I'm sure they have to you, Andrew, and you have 1,000 times better stories than this. But I did think this one was very funny because it exposed the pettiness and the ridiculousness and the sort of tragedy of Andrew, really, that he could have been this very influential figure. But apparently, even when he was at school and people said to him, tried to have an argument, he'd just say, well, I could do what I'm like because my mother's the queen. I mean, it's just so pathetic. It's just so pathetic.
Yes. Well, even as a sort of 5-year-old, he was saying, I'm a prince and stuff. And he didn't obey the rules at Gordonstoun. He didn't think that roll call applied to him. I think what we should also say about Virginia Giuffre is if she hadn't come forward very bravely, after Sharon Church had discovered her and gone public, I mean, this stuff may never have come out. There were other victims of Epstein, but, we haven't had any other victims come forward talking about Andrew. So without Virginia Giuffre, this would have been, Andrew would have got away with it. Yeah. And I think he probably thought he had got away with it when she committed suicide. So it has a certain sort of rough justice to it that, here she is speaking from beyond the grave. And it is always very poignant to see interviews with her. In fact, I was talking to Panorama people today, and they have a very, very long interview with Virginia Giuffre, only part of which has appeared. That appeared a few weeks after the Newsnight interview. And I think, I'm not telling any tales of school, that they're going to, that program will emerge quite soon. And, they say it's really powerful stuff. So, hats off to Virginia Giuffre. I mean, she has changed history, really. And for someone who, given the life she led and the way she was treated, I mean, that is an extraordinary achievement.
Absolutely. And especially because in terms of, if this is about the abuse of women, not just her, but her at the center of this particular chapter, by powerful men, Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and so far, and Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman, is currently incarcerated. But so far, men, as a network, and whoever they are and whoever they were, have so far, whoever they were, escaped proper and full accountability and prosecution. So it adds Virginia Giuffre's book and its ripple effects now continuing. I think you're right, Andrew. There is a certain either karmic or certain other kind of justice attached to the power of that book in terms of being the base engine, the source engine, the seed of what is happening currently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talked to her friends, other victims. I mean, they all felt that she inspired them. And I think we will find other victims coming forward. We had that, I thought, very powerful press conference in Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And I think, pressure will be put if when hopefully the Senate Oversight Committee are able to release papers, and clearly some of them have been redacted or destroyed. But I mean, I think will be enough there to draw attention to these people. It's clear from her book and clearly who some of these people are. I mean, I can see why they haven't identified them because of libel problems. Knopf presumably took that view. But, I think there's enough information there for people to realize who a lot of the people are, and that, people will begin to dig into their stories, and maybe other witnesses will come forward, and we will start seeing justice in the States. And as you say, some of these men being held to account. Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, it would be appalling if after all this, they kind of managed to get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's going to be complete. I mean, it's going to obviously be a sort of blockbuster media event, but it's going to be an amazing moment of reckoning if this gets into the American political system, which is so sort of, and do you know what I mean? It's so focused around occasion, event, and spectacle, and sort of, there's a lot of showmanship in American politics, right? So I just feel if this really, and I know the Democratic Oversight Committee, are they called, Tim, or the Oversight Committee?
I mean, it's already.
They're doing a lot of very punchy press releases. Like
it's already in the political system here. But as you've both have seen, so far the walls of the dam are being sort of held back currently by the Republicans in power in all arms of the government. Whether that sustains or holds is another matter entirely, and we shall see. But yes, that is the current situation here.
I think once the midterms come, I think the Republicans are going to be in big trouble because, voters will see how, they sided basically with protecting their own skins at that time rather than actually doing what was the right thing. But I mean, it's a sort of Me Too moment, but actually for the wider world, that was sort of the showbiz world and the experience of women there. And I think we're going to see it, hopefully, begin to break through. I don't know. Is there any news on the ratifications? Sorry. Is there any news on the ratification of the senator that they need to just get this through?
No, not at all. You see, not a senator. I think it's a congressperson.
A congressman.
Congresswoman. And no, she still has not been. She's still not been signed in, as it were. They are still holding that up. So somebody who has been elected to a seat in Congress, a Democrat, has not been allowed to take their seat currently. And this is now, I think we're into our third or fourth week of that being in abeyance. So, like you say, there is a lot of power play. Andrew, just in terms of this particular arm of the story, as Tom said, and as our readers are saying, our watchers and our listeners are saying in these lovely messages for you coming up on the screen.
So I haven't seen them. Gosh.
For so many years, you've been working sort of man alone, sort of trying to dig in and get the information out and getting it out under extreme sort of circumstances and opposition from those in power. Given the trajectory of the sort of 3 weeks of events that we had, has it made your reporting easier? You mentioned a few minutes ago that people were now beginning to return calls and certain tribunes and tributaries of information are opening up. How has this affected you and your information gathering going forward, if we can ask that?
Well, I mean, there's been a tsunami of responses, and that's really lovely. I mean, lovely to hear these stories. Lovely, very flattering that they've written. Very helpful, because I think I've got about 60 pages of notes already for an updated book. It's opening up the story, areas I didn't know about, his activities, for example, in Mongolia. More and more of the same sort of stories of pretty extraordinary behavior. I mean, and as I say, some quite important people like PPOs who really knew what was going on. So yeah, it is, because actually there's been quite a lot of hassle, and it's a risk. You put your reputation on the line, and you're a bit exposed. And it's lovely to have support of people like you and Tom, and also these nice comments that people have been making, that you don't feel you're operating in isolation. I mean, for a long time, I did feel I slightly put my head above the parapet and was a bit of a sitting target. So, it does give one faith in human nature that these things are important, and people are on the right side. And certainly going around the literary festivals, I'm seeing crusty old colonels who are saying, this is appalling. I'm a monarchist, but I don't believe that this should be allowed to happen. So that does strengthen one's faith in human nature. And so when people throw brickbats at you, you have broader shoulders now. I certainly feel that. And I'm intrigued to find there is clearly a huge story here. I've only got the tip of it, and I hope others will follow and find new things. And I'm encouraging journalists to do that, because the more of us who do it, so it's not just a sort of personal thing. But I do think there's a lot more still to come out. This story is going to run and run.
Do you think that the reason, Andrew, that that they settled with Virginia Giuffre was ultimately because a lot of the stuff that's in your book they knew would otherwise come out in the form of disclosure, in the form of statements? And do you think we were told at the time that it was to not distract from the Queen's Jubilee? I mean, that now seems very hard to believe, and it seems much more likely that it's actually because they knew that there were all of these incredibly embarrassing and way beyond it. Sorry, embarrassing is a completely inadequate word, but there were these devastating stories about Andrew in the ether that everybody knew, and that's that it just needed somebody like you to dig up. Was that really why they settled with her?
Yes, I mean, they certainly knew a lot of the stories. A lot of people have gone to complain. I think I often tell the story of the MI6 people who complained about a $5 million suitcase from Kazakhstan, which went to the the palace, and they knew about it. So they certainly knew a lot of these stories. They certainly, why else would they have shut down ABC? But I think also they just didn't know how bad it might be. They knew the sort of person Andrew was, and I think they were worried that what might come out. They kind of shut down the Burrell trial. If you remember, the Queen kind of suddenly remembered that Burrell stealing Diana's lingerie was for to keep for the children or something extraordinary. Absolutely, this was just a classic cover-up. They could see that he wasn't going to come across well in court. I mean, even if they didn't know everything. Just shut this thing down, pay her off, get rid of her, and that's sort of what Epstein was doing.
Who do you think paid for the settlement, Andrew?
Well, we don't really know, and again, this would be useful for transparency, because he didn't have at that time huge sums of money. He had got some money when he sold the Swiss chalet, but that was many years later. I think the Queen, personal money from the Queen, from her own private income, and people talk about the Duchy of Lancaster, but I think she must have other investments. And I think it came from that. There's some stories that King Charles put some money in as a loan. But we just don't know. I mean, they tell us so little about these things. I don't think public monies were used. That was always the concern. I think it was their own money. Maybe one day we'll know. I think when probate on Virginia Giuffre's estate is done, we may get a sense, because we just don't know if the money even reached her. I mean, if the money reached her charities, for example. Mm-hmm. But I think it was very interesting that the gagging order was only for 1 year. It did suggest that that was concession not to upset the Platinum Jubilee, but also what a strong position she was in, that she could dictate those terms, because normally those sort of settlements, there would be a gagging order forever. And that's what the royal family do. I mean, they get everyone to sign NDAs, and some of the people I talked to were absolutely terrified of NDAs they'd signed sort of 30 years ago that might be used to come after them. It's just slightly intimidating, all these things. Because in some ways it should be based on trust. I mean, perhaps it's a bit naive, but if you're a good employer, people will be loyal to you and they won't spill the beans, and you pick people who you think will be discreet. You shouldn't have to tie them up in legal documents in order to stop them speaking. And we had this extraordinary situation where Fergie was taking people to court for breaking the NDAs she'd made them sign, and she was busy hawking her story around New York publishers and offering to talk about Diana, and talking to say, I've got, we can novelize my life and it will be a Romain Clay, and etc. I mean, complete double standards the whole time.
Sort of invasion of self-privacy, but on their own terms, not
exactly. And we see it with Harry, Sue, the same exactly. Thing. They have a very little sense of self-awareness, and it's backed, this entitlement. They just can't think beyond what they think is their due.
Do you think then that, I mean, it seems to me inconceivable that Charles was not closely involved in the decision to pay off Giuffre? Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yes, absolutely. I think also by that stage, I think as you've written, it was a sort of transitional monarchy. The Queen was taking slightly more of a back seat. Philip was kind of out of the equation, who would normally have been, I think, pretty involved. So I think it was, absolutely Charles and lawyers and various people. There are a lot of people who know a lot of things who are not talking. And I would say just perhaps reflect and consider your conscience, how you've protected this man and allowed some of these victims to be abused, particularly having shut the story down many years before it came out. Just think about that.
As we near the top of the hour, Andrew, Tom and I, at the end of last week, as I'm sure you were sort of hearing rumors of a sort of major royal announcement coming. Then it didn't, Thursday and the Friday into the weekend. As this week begins, are you expecting sort of, should we be expecting dramatic announcement from Palace around this story, or are you sensing another sort of chapter of press strategy from the Palace as the story evolves into this week, or where do you think the next sort of set of pins may be?
Well, I think it just depends what the media find. You know, they're digging very heavily, and there will be some story that will appear, perhaps in Sunday papers or perhaps sooner, that will put them again on the back foot. So I don't think they're leading the agenda on this. They're just reacting to events. And I thought the piece in Sunday Times yesterday by Josh Glancy on the perfumer, making the similarities with the perfumer affair, was actually very good. You know, there is this sense of change in the world, or in Britain, and it's not so much. I mean, the crimes or the scandals around Perfumer and Andrew are sort of just the catalyst for a wider examination of British society and the way it's organised and run, and the way that, you know, still the establishment still kind of calls the tune.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us today. Me and Tim, well, thank you so much. I know you're a busy and much in demand man, and me and Tim are thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you.
I'm just going to use the last few minutes just to say to people, please, Andrew has got a Substack as well. Check out his Substack. Check out the Royalist Substack. There's a link in the description that will give you 20% off membership of the Royalist Substack, and that is only valid until Sunday, which is November the 2nd, and then it'll be back to full price. It's not terribly expensive. It's like $50 or something like that, but it means the world if you're able to subscribe and keep us all in business. And well, Andrew Lownie,
investigations, holding people to account.
Thank you. Well, Andrew Lownie, it's been brilliant to have you. Absolutely brilliant to have you. And I know that me and Tim are just really in awe of the work that you've done on this.
Well,
and
good journalists like you. That's very flattering.
Thanks very much. Okay, right. We'll leave Ben to our brilliant producer. Ben will hopefully get us all out of here and sign us all off and end the stream. So thanks very much. Goodbye. Bye.